And welcome, folks, to another episode of Alive and Free. Here we are. We're going to talk with somebody else today. As most of you know, given all of the times I have mentioned this in my own journey with many things, coming out of the pornography addiction years ago, I ended up deeply associated with snacks and sugars and foods of that sort. When I was vegan for a number of years, I noticed that a lot of the vegans around me, they were very, very conscientious about their food, but then almost all the time we're binging on some kind of vegan healthy sweet. And so we have somebody here today who he has his own story, and we'll get into that, but who has spent his time over the last while leading tens of thousands of people to confront this very issue of sugar in particular, though sodium and others could be culprits as well. And so we want to invite and welcome Mike Collins. Thanks for being here. Where are you coming in from, by the way?
I'm in Florida, Tampa Bay.
Okay, there we go. Okay. So, you want to get us rolling. Why sugar? Why is sugar the culprit? How did you end up in this situation as the quitsugar.com, sugaraddiction.com guy?
Great. Thanks for having me. So it's an honor, honestly. I've looked at your work, and the work that you're doing is the core of my work. It's strange that they are intersecting this way.
Hmm.
So it probably started a generation back. My mother was my favorite sugar junkie. I mean, she was uh, my grandmother died when she was only 8 years old, and they made a deal with she had to move in with my great aunt, my grandfather and her, the last kid left, and they owned the country store across the way. And anytime my mom walked into that store, she could have anything she wanted, just put it on my grandfather's tab.
Hmm.
And that was a wonderful thing to do to a child for a child who just lost her mom at 8 years old. But she grew up believing sugar was low. And I think a lot of people do this. They grow up and they're baking for them and they share fun times with them and they reward them. And it's just not, it's a cultural thing now that needs to be changed because the science is proven that that much sugar is not good for some. Anyway,
Hmm.
fast forward, I grew up that way. That was it. I mean, we were covered up in sugar. It was insane. I run into beer at 14 or 15, and I knew beer changed my state. I knew it changed how I felt.
Hmm.
Behind the high school, I could, liquid courage, we used to call it. I could talk to the girls, and I was pretty shy. I found out later that I was an introvert. Anyway, another quick fast forward. I get sober at 28, and we can talk about that if you like. I'm an open book about all that. I believe in recovery out loud. So anything you want to talk about there. But as I came off and started to meet my friends in recovery, you've heard of the freshman 15 in college where
Yeah,
you
yeah, totally.
15 pounds. Well, this is the freshman 50. People were getting sober and they were gaining 50 pounds like in a year. And I gained a bunch of weight. And the caffeine, the sugar, it was all treating me just like drugs and alcohol. That I had to have it. Drinking 16-ounce Mountain Dews, 6 or 8 of them a day. They used to call me the Mountain Dew man at the store.
Hmm.
So, I stumbled on a book and I don't know how or why it stuck, but I was and they were talking about sugar. It was a very popular book back in the day.
What was the name of the book?
Uh, you would have had asked me that. It was
Sorry about that.
William Duffy, Sugar Blues.
Sugar
It's
Blues.
interesting his love of jazz and singing and everything. He called it Sugar Blues. And the funny story about this is he actually married Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star, and they promoted that book quite a bit.
Okay.
And so anyway, it just stuck, and I got off the sugar. It took me years to get off, back and forth, because I didn't have anybody to talk to. My friends in recovery would call me the weird addiction specialist, right? So they're like goofing on me because the older guys would say, "Wait, are you sober today?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm sober." Say, "Well, don't worry about the sugar." And it's in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous twice that you could use sugar when you're coming off alcohol.
Hmm.
And anyway, keep going. My I talked my wife, who I met in recovery, into having children with no sugar, no flour, well, no caffeine, and no sugar,
Hmm.
and and somehow she believed me. And in the womb until they were 6 years old, my kids never had sugar. And in my heart, in my soul, in my belief system today and then probably, but uh, their brain just developed better. It's a long story, but the short version is, perfect scores on their college entrance exams. I'm just not that smart. Okay. And neither was the mother. So now they have big nonprofits, 1,000 days, first 1,000 days, where the brain development is so insane during the first 1,000 days of life, including the conception forward. And so, that experiment worked. Anyway, they grew up very differently, right? Obviously. And they didn't even have sugar on outside, except outside birthday parties for the whole child. And at home, never.
Hmm.
And so they said, Dad, write a book, write a book. So I didn't write the book till 2018. It came out, but I had opened sugaraddiction.com in 2009,
Hmm.
and I found great information, but I had a regular job. This wasn't my profession or anything.
Sure.
And no, people they took it pretty good, but didn't really get there. After the book came out, and I started coaching. And so I started coaching online, and I knew from my recovery background that I'd met some, and I'd audited a few of the food groups in recovery. And I realized that meetings were important. So the 5 or 6 or 10 people I was coaching at the time, I would meet on Tuesday evenings. And then, a couple of years clicking on, and I enjoyed it. I'm kind of semi-retired. I really, helping people get off it. It was great. But when the pandemic hit, all hell broke loose. And you saw the footage where all of the baking supplies, all the sugar, all the soda, all the cake, everything was gone. The supply chains for people were at home, right?
Hmm.
Two things happened. One, they started to understand how to use Zoom. And so I took that meeting, which still exists today, years later, that Tuesday evening meeting, and it went from one meeting a week to 4 or 5 meetings a day in 18 months,
That's
right?
huge.
Yeah, so we have these support meetings today, 4 or 5 of them every single day. We have the 30-day detox, which is a video series. And so it's a community off of Facebook, off of social media, where people can meet and walk through this. So anyway, that's the short version of it. And the sugar-free man thing came in during the pandemic, and it just stuck, and I went with it. So that's kind of how I became a sugar-free man.
That's
Hold on.
great. So what's the title of your book so that everybody can hear who's listening knows what it is so that they can go find it.
The Last Resort Sugar Detox. And the reason it's called The Last Resort is because we're the last house on the block. I mean, the folks in my community have tried everything, everything. Strangely enough, and this is weird, but I don't understand it yet fully, but 95% of my clients are women between 45 and 90 or 80 or 90.
Hmm.
And I just, it just is. And I'm trying to get it down to childbearing age women, but they haven't to date been interested. So that's kind of where
Interesting.
yeah,
We
yeah.
could theorize on that a little bit, but most of the time since I have been married to a childbearing age woman and have watched those years, they're too busy and they're in a mode where focusing
Well,
on
I think
themselves is
I
not part of it.
honestly believe, I've come to believe that the struggle for women with dieting and weight, and they have narrowed it down when they're premenopausal, and they've narrowed it down to they can do every diet, because I've had every diet literally known to man come through my community. Uh, they've narrowed it down to sugar being their Achilles heel.
Hmm.
And if that's the case. Yeah.
That's interesting. So, if you are a lady listening to this and you happen to be of childbearing age or not even married or whatever else, maybe check and see if sugar is the thing despite
Yeah.
all the other stuff. That which
We do
that's why.
have some. We do have some, but it's not. It's the exception as opposed to the rule.
Yeah. So which links up to my observations in the vegan world. I was vegan for 6 years, a bunch of martial artists. Yeah, the Shaolin monks were vegan. So we had Chinese food and we had our tofu and we had all these other things. But like on top of it was like, oh, this donut is vegan. Oh, this it was like veganism gave this sort of stamp of approval on things. And it was bizarre to me because they would eat really, really healthy and then vegan desserts.
You do not want me to go down this rabbit hole. I
Oh,
was vegan, I was raw food, I was a fruitarian, I was a macrobiotic vegetarian. I've been that whole cycle, right?
okay.
I actually have a contemporary who will not work with a vegetarian. I don't draw that line yet. My first coach was a vegetarian and she was successful. It's just more difficult to get off ultra processed carb. And I've interviewed every major vegan influencer educator in the world,
Hmm.
from Conrad Esselstyn, Gabriel Cousins, Gerber, all of them, every single one of them I've interviewed, and they're aligned with me in that they need to get off the ultra processed carbs, even the vegetarians and vegans, right?
Hmm.
Uh, but I do believe that it, and this is a little bit scientific, but the culprit in all this is fructose. It's
Okay.
the half of the sugar molecule, which is prevalent in everything vegetarians and vegans eat, right? All of the vegetables have been hybridized to and grains as well is very difficult on your blood sugar. What makes it, skyrocket. Oats and rice and all the bases of vegetarian eating, and forget about the fruit. The fruit, this is the big thing. I get a lot of grief about this, but I've, had a lot of success stories when people listen up a little bit, is that the fructose molecule is the identical molecule in the fruit and the vegetables that have been hybridized to take the bitterness out as the fructose molecule in the table sugar. Half of the table sugar molecule is glucose and half of it is fructose, right? And so the molecule doesn't change. It's like there's not a different molecule, it's the same one. And if you're continuously ingesting a lot of fructose, it keeps the cravings for ultra processed carbohydrates alive. So you're not successful in reducing or eliminating ultra processed carbohydrates. And that's why you see that in the vegan and vegetarian communities.
Mm. So what's I forget her name off the top of my head. She has an Instagram channel, influencer, and she's on about the fructose molecule quite a bit. She wrote a book. We talked about it on the show. I'm blanking. She's French. She has a Frenchish accent.
Oh, the glucose goddess.
Yeah, the glucose goddess. There you go. She discusses fructose from the standpoint of the idea that the body can't actually process it. It just stores it or something else like that. Is that why we end up with it creates this sort of craving response? So what is it that
Yeah,
creates it?
no, I mean, the science is like amazingly progressive or getting there. And what I always lean on with the fructose, and a lot of the research, and a new paper just came out a couple of days ago, um, is the behavioral change process created by fructose. Yes, fructose can only be processed in the liver. A very small amount can be processed in the intestines, but it's very small. Most of it has to be processed in the liver, and it causes fatty liver.
Mhm.
We are in an epidemic of fatty liver disease of 5-year-olds, and this is an alcoholics disease. They do not drink alcohol, but it's the fructose that's causing the fatty liver. And the behavioral change process is so interesting. There's a doc out there, Richard Johnson, who has done a lot of work, even got a grant from the government, um, that he believes if he can block the fructose pathway, he can cure alcoholism.
Mhm.
And it creates a bunch of different human and eight kind of animal behavioral processes, meaning risk. One of them is risky behavior. They will risk their lives to get to the fruit. There's a great example on the documentary Empire Chimp
Mhm.
on Netflix, where the one band was the large band of chimps, And the fruit tree that bloomed only once or twice every 2 or 3 years was in their territory. And the smaller band risked their lives to get to it. And one of them got killed getting to it. And another one that it creates is foraging. It's like you're always hungry
Mm,
because of more fructose. And the reason is because the villi in your stomach literally grow. They get larger with large amounts of fructose in your intestines. And that's only one thing that happens in the intestines. Also, in the intestines, the loose junction in the endothelioma, the
hmm.
tight junctions become loose. And so particles can slip through what is supposed to be a end or a sealed tube from your mouth to your anus. And so now the common slang or, it's not scientific, but leaky gut happens,
Yeah.
right? And so fructose does a lot of damage that people don't understand. But I personally believe that, and here's another part that the esteemed Dr. Lustig says is fructose is completely vestigial in the human body. He believes that it's vestigial, but I believe it's process, meaning it has no function in the human
Right.
body.
Right.
But I believe that it has a very symbiotic relationship to the fruit, as we would discover thousands of years ago, the berry bush, and then we would eat it, and it would upset our intestines, and then we would spread the seeds around,
Hmm.
right? And so I believe there is a symbiotic relationship, but we used to get fructose once or twice a year. That's it. At the peak of ripeness of those nasty berries and nasty crab apples, not the hybridized fruit we see today, not the hybridized, beautiful, giant fructose packages that are seedless, grapes, oranges, uh, whatever, things that would never recreate in nature, right? They were hybridized for what? For sweetness, right?
Yeah.
So,
Now,
you
when they
know,
did that, when they hybridized these, were they doing that at a genetic level where they're like, hey, we can use fructose? Or were they just kind of like initially just kind of selecting for sweetness in fruits and then over time maybe they realized some of these things? Or how did that work?
yeah, they were only optimizing for fruit for sweetness, and they
Mhm.
would husbandry, I think is the word in
Yeah.
animals. They would put them together, and they get another sweeter one, and then get more. It just kept building upon itself in the last 300 years, where the sweet packages we see in the grocery store now bear no resemblance to the fruit that 300 years ago. A banana pod is almost all seeds, old ones, and the crab apple is
I know they're tiny.
they're tiny and they're bitter, and they're not really this beautiful crispy golden package you see today. And people don't realize that unless you were trying to get a little honey from a thing and risk getting stung by a bee, or you were at not they didn't eat any green apples or green, only that 1 week where the berries or the apples were at their peak of freshness were they even palatable to a human,
Mm.
right? And that was once or twice a year, not a 24/7 drip of fruit and processed fructose that we have today.
So as you're talking, I can imagine people listening to this going like, crap, well then what do I eat?
Well,
The
I get
grains
that
are
all the
bad, the
time.
fruit's
I,
bad.
I, I get that all the time. I really
Yeah.
do. And what does the sugar-free man eat? I
Mm,
am largely from that vegan vegetarian background
mhm.
to fruitarian macrobiotic. I mean, I went through them all. I have become, close to a carnivore, and I eat a lot of animal products, keto or carnivore, because I just believe that it's a healthier diet. And I have a story about it where I've been sugar free for 37 years. 25 of those years, I was, practicing vegetarian and veganism, and and I started the summits, the Quit Sugar Summit, 11 years ago. And when I started listening to the people who were anti-sugar, basically they were anti-sugar, but they were vegan, I mean, excuse me, keto and carnivore influencers or educators or authors or whatever, and scientists and professors. And so I started listening to them, and I ran across this woman who had been sober for 50 years. And I'm like, I'll listen to her. And she got off the grains. So here I was, 25 years, no flour, no sugar, no caffeine. Okay. Yet I had basal cells across my hairline. You can see they had started cutting them off, and they got my nose. Everything was basal cells on I had adult acne, I had rosacea, I had bleeding gums.
Hmm.
Like this is on a bit, a more plant-based,
Predominantly.
I
Yeah.
guess the
Yeah.
plant-based diet. And so I listened to the woman. I had oats every single morning for 25 years. I had brown rice twice a day.
Hmm.
These are spiking my glucose. I didn't realize it, but they're spiking my glucose, right? Anyway, and the worst part of this, both my parents were dying of Alzheimer's at the time.
Hmm.
And uh, I was getting in my late 50s, I was getting cognitive lapses. Not like a walk into the room, forgot why I walked into there and forgot my keys. I would go from browser to browser. I couldn't remember why I just transferred to that browser. You know what I mean? And that was scary as hell. So anyway, in about 3 months, 2 or 3 months, the I have my adult acne, the rosacea, the bleeding gums, and even the basal cells diagnosed. They receded and they were no longer red or irritated, right? And and the cognitive stuff took about 6 months, but that resolved as well, and then no longer have it, 10, 11, 12 years later. So physically, for me, this was an important change. Now, I've had now, 60,000 detoxes. This is pattern recognition at scale. I've seen this over and over and over again. Hundreds of 100-pound weight losses, hundreds of type 2 diabetes remissions. Rheumatoid arthritis is a paper tiger. 95% of all people who get off sugar and ultra processed carbohydrates, their hands and knees stop hurting immediately. But what I really want to talk about, if you're willing, and I know your work involves this, is that the emotional behavioral change that is required for this. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of people try this. They try, every diet on the planet says the same thing: get off the white stuff, right? But when they try, these are educated, sophisticated, multimillionaire attorneys, doctors, every walk of life has tried this, but can't seem to succeed, even though they're committed to it, right? And the reason is because this is the worst substance use disorder pandemic the world has ever known.
Hmm.
And it requires a substance use recovery process, not a diet. The diet industry has brainwashed people into believing that eat less and exercise more will work for them. And there's a new book that came out. You know the statistics: 95% of all people that lose any amount of weight gain it all back
Yep.
in the first year.
Hmm.
Or then some, they add some. But the new book has effectively raised that to 99% and reduced the success rate to approaching zero, that
Dear.
almost no one succeeds in this. The reason some of the diet industry works is because exercise will be some of your self-soothing for a time. But when you get hurt or when you don't have time or what another major upset happens stress wise, or maybe something surfaces, some trauma surfaces, right?
Hmm.
And you can't handle it with exercise anymore. You fall back to what has worked for decades for you, which is sugar and ultra processed carbohydrates.
Yeah. When
That's
I'm talking
when,
with clientele, I'll tell them, I'm like, look, there's no guarantee ever in life. And so if you get to a place where things are too intense, your brain's naturally going to want to go back to, well, what worked last time? And if all of your current patterns don't work, it's going to show up on the list. You got to be aware of that. That
Yes.
because a lot of people think, well, how can I be guaranteed that this is gone, be clear of it? And I want to get rid of that idea from the start. Like the guarantee is, well, you manage things when they're tiny. That's your guarantee.
Yes. Yes. And people, it, it takes about the arc of a podcast to kind of get this all out and
Hmm.
see if this information will resonate with people, right?
Yeah.
Because they're so brainwashed. Because everybody that comes to me wants a food plan and an exercise plan. Like, and if I let them, and I train the coaches this way, they will drag you for months. Can I eat this? Can I eat that? What about this? What about that? Thinking it's about the food
Hmm.
as opposed to focusing on this real, you know, the real root of the problem, which you're experienced in recovery stuff.
Yeah.
If you started drinking and drugging at 14 or 15, you stop growing emotionally. This is a common construct in treatment, and it's a common construct in the world of alcohol and drug recovery. Now, if you extrapolate this backwards to 14 or 15, you start to, or excuse me, 4 or 5, you start to understand that maybe even your parents were complicit in this, that they were busy, they had other kids and a job and everything. They would hand you the cookie, send you to TV, and your little brain just got a adult-sized blast. The entire day's dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, adrenal glands, endorphins, cannabinoid receptors. Everything just got blasted into your little body. And this recognition happens where I was upset and now I'm not upset. And this unconsciously carries forward until you're 40, 50, 60 years old. And this thing that served you through your whole life no longer served you and has decimated your physical body, right?
Hmm.
And if people can just get this little golden key to the golden lock and understand that, the emotional life that you have has been outsourced or hijacked by a ubiquitous product that is, it's not like you needed a beer on a Friday. Like you're an adult, you had a crappy week, and you just wanted to numb out and have a beer. This unconscious self-soothing raises itself as a craving that says, wouldn't a little chocolate be nice? I need a soda, whatever, you know? And then it just never ends. It
Yep.
never ends. It's a 24/7 drip. And this effect on your emotional life is the reason most people can't quit because they don't put the two and two together. They don't understand that's what's happening.
Yeah, I did an episode a little while back, just exploring some of the writings of the early Christian church saints and fathers and whatnot. St. John Climacus wrote in his book, The Ladder of Divine Ascent. So he's speaking about spiritual things. And his statement was that if we really look at it, we will find that the stomach is the source of all human shipwreck.
Ah, I got to get that passage. That's a good one. I like
It
that.
it is beautiful because he's declaring that if you can put your stomach in line, then your sexual urges will be in control because nobody's really all that horny when they're hungry, and like all these other things will fall in line. And my suggestion would be to pair that with James in the Bible, who's like the tongue, and we usually think he's usually talking about what you say, but it's this sort of like taste bud craving thing. And if you could control that, I mean, so many other things go by the wayside. So much of the time with people who are struggling with like pornography addiction. I mean, that's a huge hit to the entire system
Yeah,
when they're controlling their just how they eat and they're learning to like say no to certain things and put themselves into a better situation. The control in the other arena starts to come with it, and it doesn't seem linked in their brain, but it is very, very definitely linked. So it's not just emotional things, but spiritually at a deep, deep level,
right.
this sort of like giving yourself over to be a slave to an invisible thing too. Most of us didn't know. We didn't grow up knowing that this was in the food. We didn't know they were putting it in there. We didn't know they were running split tests to see if tiny variations in flavor
It's
would like
true.
shift all of this stuff. I mean, the amount of like molecular manipulation that has gone on in order to make Dr. Pepper work, or all of these things.
It's so true. It's so true. There's so many books out now that have described the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very real. And one of
So
the things that you're kind of triggering for me a little bit is that you really do need the biochemical brain repair
yeah,
order to overcome these addictions, you know what I mean, or whatever they are. It could be a process addiction like pornography, or it could be a substance addiction. You have decimated your brain, literally. You have like Dr. Daniel Amen, done 100,000 scans, and the standard American diet folks literally have holes in their brain. And if they stop and go back to whole food, those holes fill in
yeah. How
after
long
the
does that
first scan.
typically take? From what you know?
I think it's at least a year
Hmm.
uh, till you start to see the cravings calm down, the quiet, the noise to crave it calms down, right? That's always the main thing, and it's actually the GLP-1s do this as well. Quiets the noise, quiets the craving, you
Hmm.
know. And
GLP-1s like Ozempic and some of those others. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
people on the Ozempic have quit drinking and quit doing gambling and stuff and quit porn because it has an effect on the dopamine and all of the other ones that I mentioned. I use dopamine because as a catchphrase because a lot of people understand dopamine or starting to understand.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So we're talking about sort of this emotional connection with food, right? From the time we're born, we come out of the womb and it's like it's time to go. And what do we get? We get a brain squeeze, we get a heart squeeze, we get a full body emergency. And the first thing that they try to make happen after the cold air blast and the bright lights in the face and the like snip of the umbilical cord and measuring you and all the other stuff is they put you on mom and you get a hug and then they want you to nurse almost immediately. And so
Right.
right from the time you're born, you're trained that the solution to all your pain, all your problems, all your everything is a full stomach, is something in the mouth. And that persists for a long period of time. And so we're sitting here going like none of it, we're all everybody in history has been a victim to this. It's just that we're sort of in a situation where there's availability where before there wasn't. And so we're here and we got this emotional connection with food. Now I went through a program. I was checking out a few different nutritional programs to see which one best aligned with what I was doing. Eric Ed Meads, I'm sure you're familiar with him, Wild
Yeah,
Fit.
I've interviewed Eric.
Yeah. What I thought was interesting in his program was the first 2 weeks, he was just like, okay, we're just going to have you do this basic smoothie in the morning to replace a few things. And I just want you to pay attention to your emotional state every time you eat. So for 2 weeks, while he's giving you some information, he's having you just like when you eat, why did you eat? Were you hungry? Were you bored? Were you lonely? Were you actually thirsty and thought you were hungry? Like, how did you
Oh,
feel 30 minutes later? That kind of stuff. Is that similar to some of the things that you're doing? Or
it's exactly the same. I mean, you have to do that. You have to break the unconscious draw for quote unquote these products, because if you don't, you continue to do it, and it's really when people realize that they are eating for reasons that have nothing to do with hunger, then the light bulb goes on, right? And one time, it's a great story. So I'm working with this doctor, and she's, brilliant lady, retired surgeon, OBGYN, and Miss San Diego. I mean, this woman, amazing woman, right? And she had just lost 6 pounds at her weigh-in with her trainer, and she's all happy and on her way home. And she's like picks up her binge food and binges that evening. It took us the entire hour of coaching to realize that she had visited her mother that morning, and her mother was a narcissist and very, no matter how many degrees she got or how successful she was always nasty to her. Well, she's in a memory care unit, and she had lost part of her mind, but she was still this, degrading kind of presence and would say nasty things still to this day. Um, and it took us the entire hour to figure out that she had had that visit and that it had upset her emotionally, right? Even though she had lost the 6 pounds and she came from her trainer and never, she was all feeling good physically. She had never let that feeling go, or it didn't raise to the level of consciousness that she was processing that. And that's the reason that she went for the sugar that afternoon, you know? And so it really it's not complex.
No.
It's just understanding your, you know, what's actually going on with you. I always say what you really need to do is you need to sit down, take a few deep breaths when you have a craving and say, what do you really need, dear? And literally call yourself dear. And you can get some oxytocin by just rubbing your chest or holding your belly. You know, you can do it by yourself. You don't need a hug or whatever. And, you know, you do that and maybe even give yourself a hug, but say to yourself, what do I really need? What's going on with me? And if you keep doing that, you start to make the connection between the emotional part and what you're feeling or thinking is the physical part of I'm craving something, right? And then you can break it. You know, you can keep doing that and you eventually break it. Or just at least raise it to the subconscious level and say, well, my mother is a pain in the ass. My boss sucks, but I don't eat sugar today.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is the biggest hurdle that I see with many, many people that I work with is they run into like, okay, cool. Well, how are you feeling before? What was going on before? And they don't know.
They don't know,
They
right?
don't know. They're like, no, everything was fine.
Consciously, they don't know.
Yeah, consciously they don't know, right? So they're like, everything was fine. I was like, okay, cool. Tell me, how did you sleep that night? Tell me, did you wake up in
Right.
the morning? Well, tell me, like, do you have any deadlines going on at work? How's your relationship with your wife been? Like, anything going on with the kids? And then pretty soon there's like this, well, this happened. And I'm like, okay, and how did you feel after that? And it takes a bit to go back and go, okay, this didn't come out of nowhere. As much as it feels like it came out of nowhere, let's just assume that it never came out of nowhere.
Right.
And so it obviously came out of somewhere. And okay, maybe we don't know what it is. And so I'm working two ways with them. I'm doing like these types of discussions where it's like, where did this come from? And let's look at that so we can use our realizations to just sort of drop the coping mechanism. And at the same time, the rest of the day, I'll have them do things like, let's put a timer on your phone for every hour. So that you're checking in without needing to check in. And you're just going like, how do I feel right now? What is there anything that I need?
I like that.
And and then I'll have them like wean themselves off over the course of like 3 weeks. So like every hour, and then okay, now it's every 2 hours, but hopefully you're still checking in, and then it's every four because I don't want them to be reliant on it for the rest of their life. But they
Right.
don't have this sort of inoculation, the eye on the inside that is paying attention to the state of their own system. And as a
Yeah.
result, they're just like they're a military base without the radars on, and they're just hoping that they'll catch the bombers before before the bombs land, you know?
Right. Yeah, no, your experience is showing there because that's a great plan. I might even implement it because that makes a lot of sense. You know, the check-in of what's really going on,
Yeah.
especially during a relapse or a binge, you know, something like if they fall back or whatever. So
Yeah.
I think that's a great plan.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you've got this process where you're having people check in and be aware of their emotional states and how what is actually connected to their desire for food or to their use of food. You got your 30-day challenge for quit sugar craving. Do most people manage to quit in those 30 days, or I'm assuming there's more to it than just checking on your emotional.
It's, you know, it's harder than it seems, or should think you think it would be. Relapse is part of the process. You know,
Sure.
our access is lifetime because a lot of people our place is like a gym in January when people come back because they messed up or the holidays came along or whatever. Um, so you know, people go back and forth, but I feel like my only job in life is to get them to viscerally feel 90 full days of abstinence. If you get to 90 full days and you've been true to yourself and your program, and you know, no flour, no sugar. In our program, no caffeine. It's a long story, and I can go into it,
No,
but
no. Yeah, caffeine, it's its own
yeah,
beast. Yeah, for fair.
yeah. So, um, if they feel that, their skin's better, their weight's better, their numbers are better, their A1C, they've lost some weight, they just feel better. I mean, the common refrain is, didn't believe I could feel this good. And if I can get them there, then I've screwed up their using for life. Then they have to make their own they have to make their own decisions beyond that.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, and we have, I was the chairman of the board of the Food Addiction Institute during the pandemic, and the boots on the ground people, 50 years, that's where that lady that I told you about came from. They have kind of come up with some numbers that 1/3 of people biochemically cannot ingest sugar without setting up cravings for more sugar. It just is. You have brown eyes, I have green eyes. It just is a fact. Okay. It's like your friend who can't drink, or your friend who can have half a glass and not think about it for a month.
Yeah.
It's the same, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a third of group that are we call harmful users. And these numbers track pretty well with the obesity numbers, right? A
Okay.
third obese and a third overweight. And then a third of people we all hate. No, I'm just kidding. they, they are of normal size, but you can be a thin sugar addict. I have
Mhm.
an ultra marathoner who's a coach, and she was running 100 miles a week and couldn't take off the last 30 pounds. You can't run this off. I'm telling you, you can't out exercise this diet, this bad diet. So, you know, if people would follow the understanding that we've learned, again, this is pattern recognition at scale. We've seen it, everything. There's very little that we haven't seen in people's attempt to change. And if they can get through that first 90, 60 is good too, and 30 is obviously good, but nobody's, very few people go from the standard American diet and a problem and a weight issue and a type 2 diabetes or a high A1C or pre-diabetes to a diet where their blood sugar by a continuous glucose monitor is pretty steady. That takes doing, it takes work. It takes what you're describing, what I'm describing is the emotional work,
Yeah.
right? And for the most part, most people don't understand that's what the solution is. So it's very difficult and it's almost impossible to do alone. You can't do it alone. You have to have support. 85% of our clients do not have spousal support. They've changed the diet around the house so many times that the husband and the kids are not playing anymore. You do you, girl. I'm not playing anymore. I'm
Yeah.
bringing cookies in. I'm doing what I want to do. And that's hard. So you have to have that third space, they call it these days, a new tribe, a new group of people who believe as you believe and whose body and emotions and life and health and weight has been affected by these products.
Yeah, what I'll talk to people about is like I'll go back and I use I mean I refer a lot to anatomy, I refer a lot to what's going on, just basic observation of the human system because most people are so steeped in the jargon around their problem that it's like
Mhm.
looking at the label on a jar. You can't actually see what's in the jar. And so I have to like strip off all the labels. So be like, look, that's actually a pickle in there. Like we're not,
Yeah, yeah.
turns out you're in a pickle. Okay, cool. We can handle a pickle. We can't handle a bit of ink and paper and all this other thing. Labels like addiction, labels like relapse, labels like triggers, all these things. They're so imprecise and so vague these days and are used all over the place that people don't know what's going on. So I frequently have to strip things back
I
and
like it.
have them look at what is actually happening. One of the things that I've found to be like a really profound observation that it still has people have a hard time digesting this is that the body wants to be still and peaceful and quiet. It doesn't want to do activities because that's a waste of energy. Now,
Yeah.
so there are activities that are pleasant to the system. I'm not saying but like overall, it wants to be as energy efficient as possible. So when it's quiet, and then because that also increases when there's less noise inside, its sensitivity to the outside world. So now if there's danger, I can perceive it from way far off. What happens in that space of homeostasis is that like because you're so still inside, these feelings of oneness with everything else and joint, they start to show up naturally quite well. And what I have to kind of tell them over and over again is like these emotional ups and downs that they're having, this is background static and noise. And if we can get rid of the noise, then all the need to cope with the noise and shut it off and all that other stuff goes away. We don't have this issue. So I'm usually having them track like on a given day. I teach them what I call emotional ninjutsu. And I'm like, look, this is what we do. This is the emotion. Where is it in your body? Where exactly are your butt cheeks angry? No. Are your feet craving a pickle? No, they're not. Like, okay, cool. Well, we know that the craving's only in certain places. We can handle that. And so
Right.
I'm like having them reduce this down to where we're handling tiny, tiny little deviations instead of big ones. So the reason I'm saying this is like in my mind, I go, where are the things that you're having them track or pay attention to that are the small things that enable them to avoid a lot of the big pitfalls?
I like that. I like that. That makes a lot of sense. You got a lot of good techniques that are, translatable to my work. It's very similar work. And I
Yeah,
think you kind of understand and you got to the conclusion, like I did, that it's not the action, it's not the substance, it's not the process or, the sex or the porn or whatever.
sure.
It's not the sugar and it's not the diet. It's, the short kind of version is the dopamine dysregulation. It's you know, the, I think a lot of us are born, if especially like me, was born as a sugar addict. Uh, we started the game with a little less dopamine, and we and manual manipulation of the dopamine receptors. The scientific term is
Sure.
down-regulated, thinned out. You have less of them, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and we found that uh, whatever the thing is, substances or processes, they brought that level up a little bit. They manually manipulated that system in our body, that reward system that was created over a million years to find food and sex, right? To reward us for finding food and sex. And you mentioned something very interesting that most people just don't understand or get. The third thing in, survival of food and sex of the species is conservation of energy.
Yeah.
And these fruits and fructose and honey, and these were easy ways to get energy, right? They were cheap, easy energy. They didn't require a lot of exertion to get energy, right? And as opposed to hunting something and whatever, or chewing all day on greens, whatever way it was just really a quick blast of energy. And that conservation of energy is neglected in the evolution or the description of what survival was. So it's important that people understand it and bring it back.
Yeah, very much. Because if you don't understand it, like for instance, the body itself on its own doesn't necessarily want sex. It wants to not be aroused. The arousal is a deep expenditure of energy. It costs a lot. And so sex is a way to get rid of the arousal. People have a
Right,
hard time with that one. Guys are like, no, no, I want sex. I'm like, I'm not talking about your psychology. I'm talking about your body. It doesn't actually want that. It's the
right.
arousal that's the issue because that's where you're losing life. That's where your body goes into a sort of pain response in a way. And if you can eliminate that, or at least have a choice in it, now we can talk about being in control of the behaviors that come downstream.
Yeah, I think it disappeared because, as agriculture came in and, most people weren't starving, there was expenditure of energy just kind of slipped away and people didn't think about it much.
Yeah. Especially in an energy abundant culture, with all the food everywhere, everybody's like, well, we don't need to worry about that anymore. And
Don't
now we
even.
do because now most of us are rolling down the street instead of walking. So, and I don't mean that just as like a cartoon, somebody rolling somebody, but literally like we used to ride bikes. Now you get on a bike and push a thing. And so you're sitting on a bike as if you're riding a bike, but really some motor is pushing you. They're
Yeah.
motorized scooters. Like we just roll instead of walk, instead of using our limbs and stuff like that. So, okay,
Yeah.
cool. So, all right, Mike, you've got a few places people can go to find out more about your work, about what they need to do to get started on this if they're detecting. And I would just challenge everybody listening, guys, you probably do have like a serious, if not outright, like dependency on sugar for managing emotional states or something. That if you go for a couple of days, you'll probably know it's like, man, I could just really use something right now, and that's a good indicator that you probably could look at this.
Yeah.
And so, where can they go to find you? Where should we send them?
Sugardetox.com is probably the easiest thing to remember and to find, but I'm Sugar Free Man on all the socials. You can find the Sugar Free Man,
Mhm.
uh, sugardetox.com, sugaraddiction.com. Kind of an indication of how long I've been doing this. It's like those names are not available anymore, kind of thing.
Right.
It's yeah, those are or Sugar Free Man. You can Google that. It'll lead to these sites, or there's actually a Sugar Free Man site. Yeah, I'm there. Or just put Mike Collins Sugar in Google. It'll come up.
Okay, cool. All right. So then, as we close out, what is something that I should have asked that I didn't ask that
Mm.
people ought to know?
Well, luckily, you and I are in the same field, or we talk about the emotional life. This is when I go on a fitness podcast that I literally have to double back, and we're starting another podcast
Yeah.
when I answer this question. But I think the one that you didn't ask deeply, you asked it a little bit, and we talked about it a little bit, but people have to be aware that this is a social thing. We're tribe animals, and we like to do things together. And from birth to death, and every soccer game, after every kid's soccer game, I mean, sugar in schools, it's become a reward system that is broken. And it's not until in our lifetime, you and I have remembered um, drinking and driving where the cops were the enemy and you just don't get caught until
Hmm.
muddles against drunk driving came along. And the same thing happened with AIDS. The same thing happened with cigarette smoking, where the science evolved to the point where they said they finally could confirm that this is bad. Drinking and driving risk your life and a lot of other people's lives. A lot of people think that the outing movement in the AIDS movement was about being mean or, exposing, people that were abnormal in society. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do that this was a healthcare issue and they needed attention on it as a healthcare issue. And the smoking thing is pretty self-evident today.
Yeah.
Uh, and that was a societal change that we all got to witness in real time, largely because of the $1 trillion advertising campaign that was the litigation against the states against the companies, right? And every day for a decade, they would talk more about it on the news. And our cigarette smoking in the United States went from over 44% to below 14% because of that awareness and the scientific awareness and the labeling. Well, sugar is at that place that those three movements are in now. It's in that place.
Hmm.
The science is there. I've interviewed 400 of the world's leading experts. It's very well known in my ecosystem that sugar is a dangerous neurotoxin affecting your brain, and that large amounts of it affecting your body and your glucose spikes in your brain and your body. But the common knowledge is you can give this to a baby. 90% of parents will thank you. This is not, this is a big project and a big awareness that people like yourself are kind enough to have me on to continue to beat the drum to get the information out.
Yeah.
And this is a societal change that in our lifetime we will see. This norm, this social norm will change in the next 20 or 30 years. It's just in its infancy.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm glad that there's hope inside of that. Like we wish it would happen faster, but I'm glad that there's like a sense like it's going to happen at some point
Yeah,
for
it
sure.
is. It's the
I,
right side of history, as they say, my friend.
yeah, yeah, right. So what's interesting to me is to close out and wrap up. I want to give you one more. This is 1500 years ago. Didn't take all this science, and we have another Christian saint, Maximus the Confessor, who says this. He says, "Keep your body free of disease and sensual pleasure, and it will be available for more noble things." Um, and I feel like that's kind of what you're offering without necessarily explicitly stating it. Um, but yeah, free of disease, there's all kinds of problems that are coming with the sugar thing, but the sensual pleasure that comes with it has its own problems. And if you can be free of both of those, then emotionally, mentally, psychologically, physically, spiritually, there's another opportunity for how you live your life. And so appreciate you for coming on. Thank you for sharing everything. Obviously, there's a wealth of understanding that you could share, which is why I go to his site, go to sugardetox.com or find the Sugar Free Man on all the socials. And thanks again, Mike.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Well, good.